A noble genius becomes the Academy's laughingstock because he can't use modern AI magic, but he shocks everyone when he swallows a lethal drug to destroy his own heart and awakens a forbidden ancient magic inside his brain. In this video, watch how Shinobu rises from rock bottom to crush his bullies, humiliating top-tier mages with nothing but Tier 1 spells thanks to the first Magic Emperor's grimoire. This story is packed with cold, revenge, and action. But the real shocker is what happens when he realizes his own professor belongs to the terrifying Dark Magic Tower and is trying to mind control him with a cursed chip. To know how he achieved this great feat, let us stop time and go back a little to tell the story of the Shin family, the most famous family in Korea, where Weewil was the third son who fell from the throne of a prodigy to the depths of oblivion. In a flashback, we see Hugo standing before his father, the imposing lord of the Shin family, with confidence gleaming in his young eyes. He promised him then in a firm voice, "Father, I will achieve results that shake the earth, results worthy of bearing our ancient family name." He vowed to graduate as the top student from the prestigious Obelisk Magic Academy, leading the Shin family to a peak of glory it had never known before. His father patted his shoulder, saying, "Remember, my son, you possess a natural talent and a gift that no one else in this world has." The father placed skyscraper-high hopes on his son, confident that he would one day sit upon the throne of the magical arts. With a smile full of secrets, Weewil reassured his father, "I will meet all these expectations and I will never let you down." He didn't just seek to surpass his siblings, his ambitions soared far beyond, aiming to even surpass his father, the holder of the title Greatest Mage in the Land. 2 years have passed since that promise. Now we find ourselves before the gates of the Obelisk Magic Academy, where reality tests the cruelty of promises. Inside the hall, the teacher announced the start of the second-year practical exam and called upon the student Saw Hick to begin, trying to calm his anxiety. But anxiety had no place in Saw's vocabulary. He was a young man overflowing with vanity and an overconfidence bordering on arrogance. Saw Hick bragged loudly before his classmates. "Failure? I don't worry about it, because the last rank is already reserved for its permanent owner, Weewil." Saw Hick looked at Hugo as if he were human trash, a mere burden, not even worth a glance. To him, Weewil was incapable of performing the simplest principles of magic, and he wondered mockingly, how did this failure even make it to the second year? He saw him as lagging behind, unable to keep up with AI magic, the innovation that changed the face of the world and whose secret we shall now learn. The test began, and a terrifying holographic monster appeared before Saw Hick, designed to simulate the danger of real battles. In the blink of an eye, Psychic unleashed explosive fireballs, shattering the monsters with a robotic precision that was astonishing to behold. Magic had evolved thanks to AI chips implanted in bodies. They handle mana processing and eliminate the need for complex incantations, making magic instantaneous. But our hero, Hugh, is the only one who does not possess this technical privilege. When his turn came, he tried to gather mana to his heart in the ancient manual way, summoning it to a body that carries no supporting chip. He began forming the magic circle through 8 grueling steps, trying to concentrate mana in a body that carries no supporting chip. But the attempt ended in a crushing and humiliating failure. The spell vanished into thin air, and the holographic monsters lunged towards him to crush him. The class erupted with laughter and mockery at the sight of Hugo's struggle, describing him as a relic of the past or an old mage whose time had ended. Students whispered to each other, "Someone like him has no place in our modern world. Magic without AI is just suicide." The monsters suddenly vanished when Hugo exceeded the allotted time for the test, leaving him alone in the middle of the arena, drowning in looks of contempt in the silence of disappointment. Mocking laughter echoed throughout the hall, leaving a painful resonance in the soul of Hugo, who stood alone in the center of the arena. He had no choice but to sit quietly, drowning in a sea of misery after another failed attempt was added to his record. However, a flicker of satisfaction ignited deep within him. He noticed his mana conversion speed had slightly improved, a minor progress, yet a beacon of hope for him. When he was officially labeled an AI failure, his father washed his hands of him, completely abandoning all high expectations. His father went as far as sending a nerve-shattering chemical drug, aiming to destroy the mana circle in his heart and force him out of the world of magic. But he refused to surrender to despair, choosing instead to dive into forgotten traditional magic, that grueling method requiring absolute mastery of mana without relying on digital processors. When he returned to his room, he found massive piles of ancient books stacked in every corner, muttering to himself, "If this knowledge were available in electronic format, it would have been much easier." While contemplating those paper stacks, his eyes fell on a strange book cover protruding from the rest, a book he had no memory of ever purchasing. Driven by curiosity, he reached out and picked up the book, then began to open its pages with extreme caution. The book appeared exceedingly ancient, its pages fragile as if they would crumble between his fingers at any moment. The script written inside was old and worn to the point that Weal found great difficulty in decoding its ciphers. But his eyes stopped at a name that shook his very being. Rebel Beat New. A familiar name that echoed in his memory like a forgotten legend. Rebel was the great first mage in human history and the founder of the new magic empire, which laid the foundation for all arts. Weal remembered his childhood when he used to read the biography of this emperor, fascinated by his unrepeatable power. Suddenly, and without warning, the book began to emit a strange rhythmic glow. The light intensified rapidly until it became so brilliant that Weal was forced to close his eyes, unable to withstand the intensity of the radiation. From the sheer surprise and awe, the book fell from his hands and struck the floor, while the light continued to emanate from it. Weal recoiled in terror from this sudden explosion of raw magical energy that filled the room. Then, the impossible happened. The book began to speak with a majestic voice echoing in the corners of the room. Not a human voice, but an echo of magic. The voice told him that he shared the same spiritual essence as the Emperor Beat New, and that this book had been written and waited for thousands of years specifically for him. Weal stood in utter bewilderment, unable to comprehend the truth or respond to this strange entity.
That moment was the major turning point. He did not realize then that being branded a failure was, in truth, the gateway to attaining the greatest magical blessing. While his life was changing in his room, his classmates who failed the practical exam were preparing to attend boring extra lessons, unaware that their peer had begun a legendary journey. To make matters worse, Hayul was the only one who failed that test. He had no choice but silence and endurance amidst the looks of pity and disdain that followed him into every corner. But behind that pale face and wretched body, a volcano was about to erupt. The features of his rebirth were beginning to take shape from the ashes of failure. The next day, the sun rose over the academy carrying a transformation that no one had yet perceived. Students gathered in the great cafeteria exchanging laughter and talking about their magical achievements while devouring their lunch with greed. In an isolated corner, Hayul sat alone as usual, eating his food in absolute silence, trying to avoid contact with anyone. Suddenly, a young man approached with a wide grin and asked cheerfully, "Why are you eating alone again, man? Haven't you grown tired of this isolation?" This youth was no stranger to Hayul. He was the one with the tied-back hair overflowing with vitality, who never waits for permission before invading someone's privacy. It was Jason Shan, the friend who seems so friendly that he makes you forget for a moment that he is one of the Academy's most dangerous students. Despite his casual appearance and boyish behavior, Jason is a genius mage in every sense of the word. He is ranked among the top 10 in Obelisk and managed to form 3 complete magic circles while still 18, an achievement that baffles even professionals. Jason tried to steal a bite from Hayul's plate as his habit, provoking the latter's ire and making him shout, "Eat from your own plate and leave my food alone." Nevertheless, these small bickers were Hayul's only vent in his bleak school life, and the reason he considered Jason his only friend. Jason reassured him in a serious tone this time. "Listen, Hayul, if any of those bastards bother you, just tell me and I will take care of crushing their pride." Here, Hayul felt confident enough to decide to reveal the secret. He lowered his voice and told his friend about the strange book he had found. He said to him, "I found a book yesterday, a book unlike anything I've ever seen before." Jason was immediately excited and leaned in curiously. "A book? What kind of book?" Hayul explained that it spoke of the legend Rebel Pete knew, but the strange part was that every page after the third was completely blank. Jason initially thought it was a cruel prank by the students, but Hayul described how the book glowed with light and how he heard a majestic voice calling him, leaving Jason stunned by the idea of using magic of such complexity for a mere joke. Hayul continued, "The book spoke of transferring magic to a worthy successor, and that it can only be opened by one who shares the author's spiritual essence." Jason's eyes widened and he insisted on seeing the book immediately. But Hayul hesitated, then confessed the terrifying detail he had hidden. He said with a trembling voice, "There's a line on the last page. It tells me that I must die at least once. It asks me to destroy my heart circle and form a new mana circle in my brain, and that is technical suicide." Jason was struck by panic and agitation. This is madness. Forming a circle in the brain means blowing your head off. But magical curiosity overcame his fear, and he agreed to Hayul's request to check the book for himself. As night fell in the Obelisk Academy dorms, the two friends sat before the mysterious book, tension hanging over the room like a harbinger of a magical storm that would change everything.
Huyul brought out the mysterious book and presented it to his friend cautiously, asking him to try opening it himself to see if it would respond to him. With his usual curiosity, Jason Shan gripped the book and exerted all his mana strength and mental focus, but the cover remained sealed as if it were a solid slab of stone. In the end, Jason ceased his attempts, panting, which confirmed what Huyul had suspected. The book only opens for one who shares Pete New's spiritual lessons. Jason wondered for a moment if a complex protection spell surrounded it, but he quickly dismissed the thought, dismissing a matter as mere nonsense or a puzzle not worth the effort. Jason left the room, bidding his friend goodbye, leaving Huyul alone to face that silent and terrifying paper entity. The moment Huyul reached out his hand, the book slid open in his grip with complete smoothness, as if welcoming back its rightful owner. This situation increased Huyul's bewilderment and awe. What exactly did he possess to be chosen by the greatest magic emperor in history? Suddenly, a majestic transformation caught his eye. A page that had been completely blank minutes ago began to fill with golden words dancing before his eyes. Pete New's voice echoed in his mind again. Establishing the mana circle in the heart is the way of the weak and ordinary humans, those who fear the summit. He followed with a definitive tone. If you truly want to become my disciple and carry my legacy, you must abandon your limited humanity. The suicidal demand came once more. Destroy the mana circle in your heart now, and transfer your center of power to your mind, there where true magic is born. As the words slowly faded from the page, something terrifying and wondrous began to happen. A glowing golden energy emerged from the book and hovered over Huyul's head, forming a dense halo of light. A glowing yellow schematic of his brain appeared in the air before him, as if ancient forces were beginning to stir from their slumber inside his skull. The voice returned, urging him insistently, "Open the book again. Do not hesitate before greatness, for fear is the Mage's first enemy." Huyul became certain in that moment that what he was experiencing was no trick or illusion, especially with the repetition of the mad request to create the circle in the brain. But the dilemma lay in the fact that mana, despite being the source of power, is considered poison to the human mind. Its entrance into the brain means immediate nervous collapse. In the worst-case scenario, this process would lead to certain brain death. Huyul felt that the book wasn't asking him to train, but literally asking him to commit suicide. Driven by frustration and psychological pressure, he tossed the book aside and decided to sleep, hoping the morning would bring a solution or a clearer vision. The next morning, he made his decision. He would take the book to his teacher at the academy to seek his expert opinion. He hoped the teacher would recognize the origins of this book or unravel the mystery of those forbidden spells it contained. The moment the teacher gripped the book, his facial features shifted and signs of sudden seriousness appeared upon him. The teacher noticed the ancient texts and felt that strange aura emanating from the paper. He asked Huyul with a piercing gaze, "Do you truly want me to examine this book?"
Hayul answered his teacher in a tone filled with plea, asking him to check if the book was sealed with a hidden magic invisible to the naked eye. The teacher's eyes gleamed with curiosity as he asked, "And why do you think that, Hayul?" The boy feigned confusion, replying that strange rumors had been circulating among the students about this book recently. The teacher shot him a sharp, dissatisfied look, warning him, "Preoccupying yourself with student superstitions won't help your studies, but I will examine it for you. Go now and focus on your lessons." After a meticulous examination that took some time, the teacher returned to tell him in a definitive tone, "I have checked every inch of this paper. There are no traces of magic here. It is just an ordinary ancient book." He handed the book back, saying mockingly, "Put the ghost stories aside, my son, and look to your academic future, which is teetering." Hayul reclaimed the book and returned to his room, disappointment squeezing his heart. He had hoped the teacher would unravel its mystery, but the ambiguity only grew more complex. However, a strange spark of excitement ignited deep within him. He thought to himself, if an expert teacher like him couldn't even see what I see, or open what I open, then this means the book is indeed real, and its power transcends the perceptions of these modern mages. He locked himself in his room for long hours, drowned in deep thought that tore his being between fear and ambition. Ultimately, his trembling hand reached out to pick up the medicine bottle sent by his father, those poisons intended to break him. Those pills were the official end of his career as a field mage, the final ticket to his exile into the depths of boring theoretical studies. His father wanted to destroy his talent to protect him from failure, but Hayul saw them as a means of liberation. He realized that if he wanted to follow the forbidden path drawn by Pete New, there was no escape from destroying his old circle with his own hand. His eyes stared at the pills in his palm, his hands shaking incessantly. "My life is already at rock bottom, so what harm if this attempt kills me? Death is easier than this humiliation." With a deep sigh full of suicidal determination, he threw the pills into his mouth, a massive gamble with his life to awaken the mana circle in his brain. The moment the pills settled in his stomach and their chemical effect began to circulate, a searing, tearing pain exploded in the center of his chest, as if a poisoned dagger had been plunged into his heart. He felt clearly the mana circle connected to his heart cracking, then shattering into thousands of painful shards. That was the moment his old self died. As he struggled with the agonies of pain, he began to push the raging mana toward his brain with all his will he possessed. In that decisive moment, a new mage was born. Mana flowed through the forbidden pathways of his mind for the first time in the history of modern magic. The violent pain began to fade slowly, leaving behind a sensation of numbness. He truly thought his soul would leave his body from the intensity of the shock. But suddenly, Rei Bal Pete Nu's voice returned to fill his being, a familiar voice echoing from the depths of his mind, not his ears. The majestic voice asked him, "Soul Heir, do you hear me?" It wasn't Pete Nu's voice alone. There was another strange artificial voice, made of pure mana, as if his mind had connected to a cosmic magical network.
The elements around him began to manifest in his consciousness: light, darkness, wind, and earth. He saw them as if they were dancing in a majestic harmony with the new flow of mana in his veins. He heard hidden voices, the voices of the elements laughing and singing, blessing his rebirth, as if the entire universe were welcoming him into this legendary existence. The next morning, golden sunlight seeped through his room's windows, awakening Hayul from his deep slumber after the night of transformation. He sat, leaning back, examining his limbs and body in awe. He was checking if he still belonged to the world of the living, or if his suicidal attempt had carried him to the other side. As he looked around, his wonder unabated, he noticed the mysterious book lying beside him on the bed. The moment he picked it up, the miracle occurred again. The pages that had been blank yesterday began to fill with living words and symbols forming before his eyes. Rei Bal Pete Nu's voice echoed in the depths of his mind with solemnity. "You did it, boy. You have survived the narrow passage." The ancient mage congratulated him on taking his first step on the path of greatness and informed him that this book bears a sacred name, Madrid. The voice announced that this moment was the official beginning of the legend of Shin Hayul, for the book contains within its folds all the forbidden and secret spells created by Pete Nu throughout the ages. Now, as the soul's successor, Hayul was no longer just an heir to this ancient vanished magic, but he officially became the direct disciple of the greatest mage known to history, carrying a legacy feared by kings and emperors. Hayul felt an overwhelming joy and excitement flowing in his heart. The idea of being Pete Nu's successor made his ambition touch the sky. Several days passed since that transformation, and Hayul was trying to comprehend the new powers that had begun to surge in his mind. In one of the boring lectures, while the teacher was explaining modern magic theories, Hayul was completely absent-minded, drowned in the pages of his book, Madrid. To his surprise, a new page appeared, filled with complex information about the nature of mana. He discovered a terrifying truth. Mana possesses a will of its own, a wild will that does not submit easily. And upon its entry into the brain, a violent collision occurs between the mage's will and the mana's will, destroying nerve cells. For this reason, everyone considered mana a lethal poison for the brain. But he realized with amazement that his new brain circle acts as a fortified fortress, preventing the mana's will from controlling his mind and subduing it completely. For this same reason, his mind gained an absolute immunity against the interference of AI chips that impose their control over the brain functions of the rest of the students. Suddenly, the teacher's voice rose, cutting his train of thought and drawing the entire class's attention. The teacher announced in a firm tone, "Prepare yourselves, everyone. The time has come for the evaluation exams for the second-year students." Then he added with a mysterious smile, "But there is a completely new and different rule that will be applied in this year's exams."
The teacher continued in an icy tone. "Any student who fails to achieve the required standards will be expelled immediately. The words are final, and there is no room for exceptions here." The teacher explained that this new rule did not come from a vacuum, but was the result of higher-level decisions. He revealed the surprise, saying, "This system was personally proposed by the great head of the Shin family." The news fell like a thunderbolt on everyone's ears. Whispers of panic rose among the students, and the tension grew suffocating. Everyone imagined the worst-case scenarios, except for Sayuk, who wore a wide grin, relishing the idea of getting rid of the trash polluting the Academy's reputation. Even the teacher could not hide his sadistic smile, enjoying the sight of terror taking hold of his students' faces. It was no wonder everyone directed looks of anger and frustration toward Hayul. They saw him as the reason for this crackdown, but he was drowned in his own world, indifferent to everything happening around him. After the charged school day ended, Hayul left the academy with the secret surging through his veins. As he walked through the crowded city streets with digital lights filling the place around him, he passed by a famous commercial training facility known as the AI Training Center. He hesitated to enter due to the exorbitant fees for the simulation devices. Despite the fact that a single hour costs a massive fortune, he eventually decided that the experience was worth every penny. The employee greeted him with artificial warmth, presenting him with the list of available services at the center. Hayul booked an hour for himself, and the employee asked in surprise whether he would undergo the training alone without a companion or instructor. Hayul nodded in the affirmative while pulling out his card. The employee handed him the entry card and directed him to room 4 to receive instructions on using the holographic equipment. But Hayul simply took the card and said confidently, "I know how it works, no need for explanations," then proceeded toward his room with steady steps. It didn't take long for the employee to realize the boy's identity. He is the son of the Shin family, the failure famous for his inability to use the magic of the age. The moment he entered room 4 and closed the door, the devices began to operate, emitting a faint hum of energy. The training launched, and a group of terrifying holographic monsters manifested surrounding him on all sides with their protruding teeth. The beasts roared with a powerful growl that shook the corners of the room upon seeing him, ready to pounce. Hayul extended his hand with total confidence. Although these monsters are of a low classification, facing 10 of them at once is suicide for any ordinary student. The record time for Academy students in the Wolf Challenge is 1 minute and 30 seconds, but Hayul was planning something that transcends human numbers. He had trained daily on the forbidden techniques written in his ancient book, and he found no better opportunity than this to test the extent of his progress. In a fleeting moment, he activated the new mana circle in his brain, causing energy to flow with sharpness and coldness through his nerves. He summoned the magic silently and without any AI chip, letting the power explode from his body, announcing the beginning of the holographic massacre. Hayul unleashed his magic with terrifying focus. Massive waterfalls poured down like torrential rain, sweeping away all the monsters in a single decisive strike that left no trace of them. A feeling of immense pride in his achievement washed over Hayul, though he still lived in a state of disbelief. Was all this staggering power truly his own? While the rest of the mages rely on circulating mana through their hearts to serve AI chips, Hayul was breaking every known rule of magical physics. He had become capable of circulating mana through his entire body up to his brain, thanks to the infinite circle that finally liberated his suppressed powers. He tried to summon an even larger spell, but its power was so immense it nearly exceeded his body's capacity to endure. He felt his body groaning under the weight of that force, as if collapsing before the grandeur of the ancient magic flowing within him. In that critical moment, Pete New's voice echoed in his mind. "Do not be surprised by this weight. You still have a long and arduous road to travel." The legendary mage explained to him that the infinite circle is but the foundation of Pete New's complex style. For this magic relies on manifesting images formed in the mind and turning them into reality, and this is just the first step in the book known as the heart structure. After this intense experience that changed his concepts, Hayul left the training center with calm steps. The employee entered to clean the room, preparing to go home, boredom masking his face. But curiosity overcame him, so he decided to check the results log of the fallen genius who had used the room moments ago. Suddenly, his arrogant smile vanished, replaced by the pallor of death. He saw on the screen that Hayul had completed the Wolf Challenge in just 1 minute and 10 seconds, a staggering record that places him among the ranks of professionals in international competitions. The employee kicked his device in disbelief and shouted in bewilderment, "There must be a mistake. An incompetent failure like him couldn't possibly achieve this impossible number." As for Hayul, he was walking the streets with a confidence he had never known before, realizing that this was but the beginning of a legend of which he would be the sole hero. He remembered his suffering when he formed the infinite circle for the first time. The task was grueling, it's soul-draining. The techniques in the book Madrid were completely strange. The book explains that the limbs, heart, and mind must move as a single entity with a unified will. At first, he did not understand the meaning of those mysterious words. Trying to reach enlightenment through vague texts was mentally exhausting. He felt as if the truth lay behind a transparent curtain. He could see it and almost touch it, but it still slipped through his fingers. In the sciences of magic, this stage is called the Wall of Enlightenment, where the mage hits the limits of their powers, an obstacle that has faced the greats throughout the ages. Hayul decided to focus for now on circulating mana throughout his entire body, as the book commanded, though he still wondered if this alone was enough. And when he fully regained his focus, he realized with amazement that he had been managing mana for consecutive hours. In a normal situation, this effort would have been enough to make him lose consciousness from exhaustion. But, suspiciously, he felt no fatigue. On the contrary, a slight dissatisfaction overcame him, because the threads of morning had appeared on the horizon before he had had enough of his training. He longed to spend more time honing his powers, and continued to circulate mana even as he took his first steps out of the dormitory toward the academy. On the way, he bumped into his friend Jason Sean, who greeted him with an enthusiastic slap on the back, as was his habit. Jason asked curiously, "Why do you seem drowned in another world today? Has exhaustion got the better of you?" Jason did not realize the truth of what his companion was going through. Remaining in a state of absolute consciousness to circulate mana around the clock is no easy task, but Hayul was determined to tame his new circle until it became part of his instinct. Hayul remembered his past, when he was able to form his second magic circle while still only 12 years old. At that time, he was nicknamed the Miracle Genius, and the Shin family shook with joy at his extraordinary talent. His father placed skyscraper-high hopes on him, seeing him as the leader who would guide the family to the pinnacle of glory. Now, he starts from zero with the first circle in his mind, and despite the ambiguity of the path, he realized that breaking the wall of enlightenment is his only way to supremacy. He recalled his father's old advice when he still believed in him. "My son, perfection is merely a shackle hindering your soul, a lie born from the arrogance of humans who fear the unknown." Now, Hayul deeply believed that seeking traditional perfection is a trap. He decided to focus on free growth to enhance his abilities without constraints. As he sat to meditate in the silence of his room, mana began to flow into his body in a completely different way. He felt the energy surging through his limbs, piercing his arms and legs, and settling in his heart and mind in a stunning harmony. Mana no longer resisted him. Instead, it moved at a signal from his thought, as if it were an extension of his soul. He realized that creativity and wild imagination are the true keys to making instant magic possible. Instant magic is the ability to release power without needing to utter a single incantation, which is what everyone strives for. Modern AI magic relies on shortening incantations through chips to activate spells at digital speed. But the method Hayul follows belongs to another world. It's about liberating thought from any technical medium. He innovates a flexible spell, a spell that changes its shape and function with complete freedom, ignoring sterile traditional magical formulas. Although this type of magic drains the body in a violent and exhausting manner, he could not believe he was applying something considered impossible in history books. He felt the wall of enlightenment cracking before him. He launched his imagination towards higher horizons, ready to face the world with a power no mage before him had known. The next day, within the Academy's corridors, the atmosphere was charged with omens of a storm that would shift the balance.
The teacher cut the hall's silence with a grave tone. "Hayul, there is a high-ranking visitor waiting for you at the reception. Follow me immediately." The teacher's words hit Hayul like a thunderbolt. A vague sense of anxiety unsettled his being, as if he sensed the identity of the newcomer. He followed with heavy steps until they reached the luxurious reception room. The teacher whispered in his ear, "Your father is the one who came to see you." The blood froze in Hayul's veins for a moment. The moment the door opened, prestige manifested in the form of his father, the lord of the Shin family, sitting with a solemnity that imposed silence upon the room. The teacher bowed respectfully, saying, "Great lord, I have brought your son Hayul as you commanded." The father turned slowly, as if his movement were shifting a mountain of atmospheric pressure in the room. He cast a look cold as ice toward his son, a gaze devoid of any paternal emotion, then signaled the teacher to leave. The door closed, leaving father and son face to face in a silent struggle, interrupted only by their breathing. The father began his speech in a bitter disappointment. "You are still here. Your presence in this academy is no longer anything but an insult to our family name." He continued cruelly, "This means you were too cowardly to take the medicine I sent you, the drug that would have freed you from the illusion of magic." Hayul raised his head and answered in a steady voice, "I didn't take it because I have made stunning progress recently. My magic has begun to awaken in a way you've never known." Not a hair on the father's face moved. Instead, he asked with pitiless mockery, "Are you still wasting your precious time chasing a hopeless dream? Magic without technology is merely a mirage." Hayul accepted the challenge of his father's gaze and asserted firmly, "My dream is not hopeless. I am determined to become the great mage who leads this new era." This unprecedented boldness in his son's reply caught the father's attention for the first time. His eyebrow rose with curiosity mixed with contempt. The father said coldly, "You have wasted many years of your life on illusions, and now it is time for reality to slap you and for you to face the truth." He emphasized his words. "The reality is that no matter how hard you work now, and no matter how brilliant your future achievements may seem to you, as long as you reject AI magic, you will never be recognized as a true mage in this modern world." He paused for a moment, then acknowledged his son's unique talent in a twisted way. "You have a brilliant mind. If you abandon these empty dreams and study only magic theory, you might become a useful researcher, even if you remain an outcast." But Hayul interrupted him decisively, reaffirming his unshakable stance. He said with total clarity, "I will not abandon my path in magic, nor will I settle for the crumbs of theoretical knowledge." He completed with eyes shining with a strange light. "I don't want a quiet, ordinary life, and I don't want to hide behind my family name as a shield protecting me from failure." He threw his final bomb in the face of his stunned father. "What I truly want and what I will achieve is to be the next head of the great Shin family myself." His father interrupted him in a stern tone that shattered the room's silence.
Becoming a great mage or the head of the family is not just words spoken, it cannot be achieved by mere ambition and empty dreams. Hayul smiled with a cold steadiness his father had never seen before, asserting in a confident voice, "I will prove it to you through actions, not words, and you shall see for yourself." The father furrowed his brows in a frown and asked mockingly, "Are you talking about merely surpassing the Academy's meager standards to avoid expulsion? Is that the ceiling of your ambition?" Hayul responded with a resounding bombshell. "Rather, I promise you, father, in the upcoming midterm exam, I will secure my place among the top 10 in the entire Academy." He followed with the tone of a final wager. "If I fail, I will pack my bags and leave the Academy immediately to devote myself to theoretical studies as you wish, and you will never hear of my magic again." He continued, sparks flying from his eyes. "But if I succeed, you will acknowledge my talent as a true mage before everyone and pledge your full support to me as your successor." The father placed his hand over his face in bewilderment, wondering inwardly about the source of this blind confidence that had suddenly possessed his failed son. Hayul did not utter another word. He stood with dignity and turned his back to leave, but his father stopped him at the door with one final word. The father said with a cutting coldness, "It is better for you to not disappoint me again. My patience with your failures has completely run out." Hayul left the room, leaving behind promises that might seem in his father's eyes as mere useless achievements that would never be fulfilled. A few days passed, during which a strange tension pervaded the Academy's corridors, as if everyone was waiting for the storm. The teacher summoned all the students for an important announcement, seriousness masking his features. "Listen, everyone, we will now reveal the system for the upcoming exam." Students began to whisper in panic. Will it be a fight against monsters, or a test of mana purity? Expectations filled the hall. But the teacher cut through the doubt with certainty when he announced, "The exam this time will be a single elimination tournament, a direct face-to-face magical duel." He added, clarifying, "The tournament will last for 3 days, and starting from the round of 16, major corporations and members of the Magic Tower will be allowed to attend the matches as spectators and evaluators." The teacher urged everyone to give their utmost, warning them that the eyes of the world would be fixed on them. For Hayul, this was the golden opportunity he had been waiting for, the platform upon which he would display his true capabilities before the public. News of the tournament spread like wildfire among the students, becoming everyone's primary preoccupation. In every corner, everyone was talking about power, alliances, and potential duels. Hayul could not ignore the buzz. The presence of the Magic Tower meant attracting global media, making a victory there a ticket to eternal glory. For the Magic Tower is not just an organization, but an entity comprising the world's most powerful mages, possessing influence that rivals entire nations, and every student's dream is to gain their recognition. While Hayul was drowned in his ambitions, a familiar and annoying voice pierced his ears, calling him by his old, hated nickname. "Hey, failure?" Hayul turned slowly, intense annoyance appearing on his face. Who dared to interrupt his thoughts at this decisive moment? Hayul didn't need to hear his voice to know his identity. Merely seeing the shadow of this person was enough to ruin his mood entirely. It was the arrogant Sa-hyuk, the unbearable second-year student. Despite his academic standing, his presence spreads venom wherever he goes. Sa-hyuk approached with a malicious smile and dropped his news. "The draw has put us together, Hayul. We will be opponents in the first match of the midterm evaluation." Sa-hyuk was overflowing with overconfidence, believing that Hayul had fallen into a trap with no exit. He stared deep into our hero's eyes with defiant looks. He announced with a voice full of spite, "I will finally take my revenge. I will pay you back twofold for what happened 5 years ago in that cursed tournament." Here, memory takes us back. 5 years ago, when they were both younger and more innocent, Hayul defeated his rival Sa-hyuk in a humiliating loss in the finals of the Youth Magic Tournament, a victory that earned him the title of the world's lone mage of his generation, before his incompatibility with AI magic was discovered. Since that moment, Sa-hyuk began bullying him relentlessly, attempting one insult after another to break his remaining pride. Sa-hyuk reminded him of the teacher's harsh words. "Remember, failure this time means a humiliating expulsion, and I will be the person who tosses you outside these academy walls." Sa-hyuk burst out laughing, imagining Hayul broken and defeated, crying at his feet before the media lenses. But Hayul saw this draw as a golden opportunity to silence this arrogant fool forever. He replied with biting sarcasm, "You are the one who will face loss again, Sa-hyuk. It seems you haven't learned the lesson yet." Hayul's sudden confidence ignited Sa-hyuk's rage. He had expected to see him trembling with fear. Annoyance was clear on his facial features, as if Hayul's words had touched a sensitive nerve in his wounded pride. Sa-hyuk tried to salvage the situation by laughing loudly to draw the other students' attention and embarrass Hayul before them. He shouted mockingly, "Have you been hit in the head? How can a defective and technically rejected person like you do anything against my AI magic?" Hayul let out a tired sigh, as if replying to this fool was hard labor, then directed a sarcastic hint that struck home. He said coldly, "You haven't changed at all over the years, still as loud and annoying as you were 5 years ago, all bark and no bite." Those words were enough to shake Sahyuk's confidence and return him to his old moment of breaking. But Hyul didn't stop there. He continued to press on his wounds to further provoke his anger. Finally, Sahyuk completely lost his temper and snapped before everyone. He lunged violently and grabbed Hyul's shirt collar with a strong grip, his eyes burning with a desire to kill. Hyul remained perfectly calm, and with a swift, firm movement, he forced that filthy hand off him with a strength that made Sahyuk stumble backward. He looked at him with condescension and clarified the bitter truth. "A stupid person like you will never understand that falling only happens to those who were once at the peak. As for you, you have always been at the bottom."
Hyul followed with words that fell like a thunderbolt. "One born a genius remains a genius, and I am ready to prove that before everyone in the arena." Hyul left the place with a deadly calm, leaving behind the noise of whispers and the glares of hatred. Sahyuk remained in his place, anxiety gnawing at his insides. He began to bite his nails nervously at that terrifying confidence his opponent displayed, yet he stayed determined to crush him and shatter his pride in the upcoming evaluation. The next day, the Academy woke up to unprecedented noise. Hyul had become the primary talk of forums and social media platforms. Everyone wondered, can the fallen genius truly return to the peak? As Hyul followed the news, a wave of satisfaction and confidence washed over him. Hyul realized that the offensive articles published were orchestrated by Sahyuk and his influential family, aiming to humiliate him and tarnish the Shin family's reputation. But what his rival considered a weapon against him, Hyul saw as an irreplaceable golden opportunity. For the more the spotlight shone on him and the audience paid attention to his movements, the more it served his grand plan for a comeback. Hyul received a sudden phone call from his father, who told him in a sharp tone that he had reviewed those controversial articles. Hyul tried to reassure his father coldly. "I will not let you down, father, and I will maintain the prestige of our name in the arena." The father inquired skeptically if he had arranged everything. Hyul confessed frankly to his father, "I provoked Sahyuk intentionally to draw public attention. I want the whole world to watch what I will do." The family head replied sternly, "The only reason I accepted your wager is my certainty that the danger of your failure will not shake the family's foundations destructively." Nevertheless, the father did not hide his concern that this media scandal might bring shame to the family if his son lost the duel. Hyul replied calmly, "People already believe I've been expelled from the family or that I'm an outcast, so even if I fail, the impact on the Shin name will be minimal." His father reminded him in a definitive tone, "A minimal impact doesn't mean no impact. Remember that the Shin family name will haunt you like your shadow wherever you go." Hyul agreed with his father's view, but asserted insistently, "The gains we will achieve in the end are worth this slight risk." His father asked him mockingly, "And what gains are you talking about? How will your victory in a school tournament benefit a family that possesses everything?" Hyul announced with a confidence that shook the phone receiver, "The greatest gain the family will obtain is me, father. I will become the greatest mage to ever set foot on Earth, the mage to whom everyone will submit, and I will be the strongest head in the long history of the Shin family. This means my existence is the biggest investment you've ever made." The words carried a legendary weight, as if Hyul were announcing the birth of a new era for the family at his hands. His father commented with mockery not devoid of amazement, "With this confidence of yours, you sound as if you've already defeated the master of the magic tower and surpassed his power." Hyul smiled and replied with his usual unshakable coldness, leading the family head to finally end the call and leave his son's fate in his own hands alone.
His father delivered his final warning in an icy tone. "If you bring shame to the family after all this pretension, be prepared to bear consequences you cannot imagine." The father ended the call coldly. Hyul placed his phone on the table, and silence pervaded the room. Hyul felt a confidence he had never known before. He knew the stage had been set, and the world's lights were now fixed upon him, waiting for the final performance. The promised midterm evaluation day arrived, and the Academy held its breath in anticipation of the grand confrontation. The arena was filled with high-ranking mages and media personnel. We see Hyul standing calmly, performing wrist warm-ups in preparation for the challenge.
Sahyuk asked mockingly, "Did you read the article, genius? You've become the talk of the town before the tournament even started." He burst out laughing, imagining Hyul's defeat without being able to cast a single spell. Hyul replied in a tone even more mocking and steady, "Save your laughter for yourself, Sahyuk, because you are the one who will taste the bitterness of loss here before everyone." To further provoke him, he added coldly, "In fact, I should thank you for allowing me to manipulate you like a puppet to draw the audience's attention." He completed while staring into his rival's eyes, Since we cannot stand each other, I will end this quickly. I have no time to waste on someone of your shallow level. Sah-hyuk tried to maintain his composure, though the veins in his face nearly burst from the rage suppressed behind the mask of arrogance. Suddenly, Hyul raised his index finger in his rival's face before thousands of spectators. He announced in a calm, confident voice that shook the arena, "I will defeat you using only first-level spells, one circle, and I won't need more than that." Hyul's bold declaration echoed throughout Obelisk Academy, and a silence tinged with bewilderment among the attendees. The audience's excitement ignited. The challenge was no longer just a duel, but a public insult to a mage using the latest AI technologies. Sah-hyuk could barely restrain his urge to attack before the whistle. The humiliation had begun to eat away at his pride before everyone. He felt that people's looks had shifted from pity for Hyul to questioning his own ability to withstand this challenge. The referee blew the resounding starting whistle, turning everyone's attention toward the arena that would host the conflict. The referee officially announced the start of the midterm evaluation test for second-year students. Let the duel begin. Sah-hyuk launched the attack immediately without wasting a single second, desiring to crush Hyul before he could gather his strength. He utilized his advanced AI, which began processing magical data at high speed, his chip glowing. He unleashed a massive, concentrated fireball towards Hyul, a spell that was supposed to end the duel in its first moment. But Hyul, with a stunning, fluid movement, dodged the fireball by simply tilting his body as if he had anticipated its path before it even launched.
Sahyu gave him no chance to rest and began preparing for his next move. The chip implanted behind his neck started flashing with a rapid red light as a result of the immense pressure. The signals indicated that Sahyu had completely lost his patience. He proceeded to charge a third-level, 3-circle spell, a very advanced level for second-year students. He aimed to end the duel with a single crushing blow that would erase Hyul from the arena and restore his wounded pride. The moment the spell was released, a massive wave of fire and explosions erupted, completely covering Hyul's body with a dense cloud of black smoke. Everyone in the stands held their breath. A general belief prevailed that this was the inevitable end and that Sahyu had crushed the former genius forever. An arrogant smile of victory formed on Sahuk's face, but it quickly vanished, replaced by bewilderment as the smoke began to slowly dissipate. Hyul appeared standing in his place, towering without a single scratch on his body or even a burn mark on his clothes. Sahuk felt madness and jealousy eating at his insides. How could someone without an AI chip survive an explosion like that? He lost his mind and began throwing fireballs one after another without stopping, in a random fashion lacking any strategy. As for Hyul, he remained as calm as the sea. He contented himself with summoning precise amounts of water, moving them with innate brilliance. He formed a thin water shield, yet it was as solid as steel, parrying all the explosive attacks with a simplicity that incensed his rival. Sahuk stood stunned, panting from the intensity of the effort and mana depletion. He could not believe that his signature spells, enhanced by the latest AI algorithms, had been thwarted with such humiliating ease. In the private booth, there were expert eyes monitoring every movement. Important figures noticed that what Hyul was doing broke modern magical logic. One of them muttered, "This is impossible. No mage can cast counterwater spells with this extreme speed, even if they're only from the first circle." The assistant standing beside one of the mysterious figures asked curiously, "Sir, why did you leave your urgent duties at the Azure Tower and come to watch a simple student match? Do you know something about this boy?" The answer met her in a calm tone. "I know nothing of him except what I read in that controversial article about the return of the fallen genius," he completed, his eyes never leaving Hyul. "I came driven by a curiosity I haven't felt in decades." The assistant was surprised that her superior came by mere chance, but she alerted him to the seriousness of the situation. She whispered, "If people find out that the leader of the Azure Tower and the legendary 8th Circle Mage is present here, the world at the Academy will turn upside down." The man acknowledged with a slight smile, "I know that well. It was Kim Kang, the master of the Azure Tower, one of the most powerful mages on Earth. He followed, and this is why we are standing here behind the one-way glass, to ensure our presence isn't noticed by intruders or the press." But suddenly, Kim Kang's aura sensed another prominent figure entering the arena. As he turned slowly to see who was coming, He didn't need to turn to confirm the identity of the newcomer. The aura emanating was so familiar that the senses could not mistake it. Yes, it is our hero's father, the lord of the Shin family, who came to monitor his son's suicidal wager from behind the curtain. Meanwhile, in the heart of the arena, Hyul stood with the steadiness of mountains and the calm of the confident, as if he were on a stroll, not in a life-or-death struggle. As for his opponent, Sah-hyuk, he began to bite his nails hysterically. All the digital tricks he relied on had shattered against this steadfast human wall. What truly tore at Sah-hyuk's nerves was the inverted logic. How could a first-grade water spell crush a third-grade fiery explosion? Hayul's spellcasting speed exceeded the processing speed of his opponent's AI chip, a feat never heard of before. Our hero decided to add insult to injury and crush his rival's remaining pride, asking coldly, "Do you truly want to know the secret behind my speed, or can your mechanical mind not handle the truth?" Of course, Hayul was no longer able to endure more of this public humiliation before the eyes of the high mages. He completely lost his temper and exploded in a resentful scream, losing every ounce of strategic focus. He began unleashing a volley of fire projectiles randomly and madly, turning the arena into a blazing hell with no plan but destruction. When he launched his final, greatest attack, Hayul vanished amidst the rising flames, and the crowd held their breath. Hayul breathed a sigh of relief with a distorted smile of victory, confident that this blow had settled the matter and buried his rival under the ashes. But, oh, the horror of the shock. When the dust cleared, Hayul was found standing at the same spot, his clothes well groomed as if the fire had never touched him. Hayul waved his hand in slow, provocative movements, inviting his opponent to approach closer with an irritating coldness. Then Hayul launched his first counterattack. A wind spear shot out like lightning, passing directly beside Hayul's right ear. Hayul felt the gust of cold air piercing through his scream. Now frustration and terror began to seep into the marrow of his bones. He wondered madly, how did he release a wind spear at this speed without incantations? And why didn't my fires scratch him even by a fraction? Hayul realized he wasn't fighting, but being dragged to the edge of madness by simple first-grade spells. Our hero did not hesitate to confirm these suspicions. Hayul confessed explicitly and out loud, "I want to humiliate you completely and crush your ego piece by piece before I allow you to be defeated." Hayul launched another wind spear, but this time it targeted the body directly. Hayul managed somehow, driven by survival instinct, to parry the direct blow at the last second. Hayul arose with false pride, trying to regain his collapsing psychological balance. He began to scream in hysterical mockery, "Don't get ahead of yourself, Hayul. Mere extra speed won't save you from the true power of my AI."
Our hero was in no mood to listen to Hayul's empty drivel. His response was practical and swift, to prove to him the extent of his ignorance of the truth. While Hayul was drowned in a false euphoria from parrying the previous blow, an unexpected wind spear pounced from the heart of the sky like a thunderbolt. The spear pierced the air to strike his arm with a severe injury. The terrifying part was that Hayul didn't even notice when or how Hayul released that hidden spell. Hayul raised his finger with calm steadiness, prepared to showcase a new chapter of his skills that break the laws of magical physics. Hayul appeared psychologically and physically defeated, unable to do anything but wonder madly, how does Hayul do all this without a chip? Even Kim Kang, the master of the Azure Tower, could not take his eyes from the battle for a single second. The boy's genius had completely captivated him. Hayul was superior by leaps and bounds, appearing ready to go much further, challenging his collapsed rival to see what remained in his arsenal. He spoke in a tone marked by the arrogance of victors. "Don't you see that this battle is starting to drag on more than necessary? It is time to get serious." With a simple signal from his palm, Hayul unleashed the power of the wind in a different manner. A group of sharp, cloaked wind birds shot towards Hayul, surrounding him from several directions simultaneously. The attack left Hayul in total bewilderment and extreme panic, for the winds were moving like living beings with a will of their own. It was technically impossible for a wind spear to possess the property of simultaneous dual release, so Hayul's digital logic failed to explain what was happening. Hayul confessed coldly, "Yes, what you see is true, but your limited logic will not help you understand the how." He explained condescendingly that he's capable of launching dual and complex attacks, then challenged his rival with a provocative smile. "Try to parry the next attack if you can." He announced clearly, "I will now send 4 simultaneous attacks from different directions. Get ready." Hayul hurried, trembling, to summon the strongest magical barrier his chip possessed, trying to survive at any cost. With great difficulty, he managed to protect his front from the direct hit, breathing a sigh of relief for a moment. He felt a delusional flicker of hope, thinking that as long as he could defend, he still had a chance to stay in the game. But in the same moment, one of the wind spears performed an impossible aerial flanking maneuver to sink into Hayul's back with force, while he was oblivious and reassured by his front barrier. Our hero didn't waste the opportunity to mock him again. "Good thinking, Hayul, but you shouldn't stand frozen like an idiot while death surrounds you." He reminded him in a definitive tone, "The battle has barely begun, and you must prepare yourself for what is much worse than mere wind stings." And once again, without the slightest mercy, Hayul launched a new offensive wave that exceeded all that preceded it in power and speed.
Hayul retreated a few quick steps backward, desperately trying to regain his lost balance. He aimed to create enough distance between himself and that human hurricane, thinking that space might grant him safety.
He hoped to move out of the lethal range of the wind spears, believing that every magic has geographical limits that cannot be crossed. Hayul realized his opponent's plan. In traditional magic, if the target succeeds in moving far enough away, the accuracy of attacks weakens. Hayul mockingly praised Sa Hyuk's quick wit. He said coldly, "Good thinking and skillful steps, but you were still measuring things by your limited standards." Hayul clapped both hands together firmly, directing his magical will toward the atmosphere surrounding the arena. Suddenly, the wind spears extended, and their speed doubled illogically to reach the body of the terrified Sa Hyuk. Even from that distance he believed was safe, the winds pierced his defenses to remind him that his escape was futile. Kang stood completely stunned in his booth watching this violation of mana laws, not just because Hayul casts magic instantaneously, but because the spell trajectories were changing and merging in mid-air with living flexibility, as if they were snakes hunting their prey. In that moment, Kang's gaze shifted toward Lord Shin, Hayul's father and the head of the ancient family. It was Shin Hayul, the imposing 8th Circle Mage, who was watching his son with a silence that precedes the storm. Kang commented in awe, "This boy's magic completely ignores all the strict rules of open-source magic that we study today. For modern open magic is like digital systems. It possesses a specific speed and range, and the possibility of changing its trajectory comes with suffocating constraints. For example, if the target exceeds 100 meters, the spell dissipates, and if its trajectory is modified once, it is impossible to modify it again. Therefore, contemporary mages' duels have turned into a mere mental game based on pre-calculated expectations of known and stereotypical spells. But the Pete New style revived by Hayul shatters these chains. It is a flexible magic that flows with thought, bypassing the limits of modern magical programming. With the final blow that struck its target with surgical precision, Sa Hyuk fell again. Sa Hyuk found himself completely broken, yet he remained in a state of pathological denial, refusing to accept the reality of his defeat at the hands of a failure using first-grade spells. Hayul reminded him in a definitive tone, "You underestimate the lower grades too much. Even if you drain your opponent's mana with massive third-grade spells, it all takes to end someone's life is one small, precise strike in the right place." Of course, Sa Hyuk did not comprehend Hayul's deep philosophy, as his mind was clouded under the weight of shock and humiliation. Then, with a calm movement of his hand, Hayul summoned water magic once more, to end this performance by drawing the final curtain.
The water moved with a slight gesture from Hayul's fingers, flowing with a lethal, fluid smoothness toward the collapsed Sa Hyuk. The waters surrounded him from all sides like spider silk, beginning to tighten gradually to stifle his remaining breaths. In that critical moment, Hayul whispered coldly, "You know, Sa Hyuk, it isn't necessary to summon fire dragons to end a life. A precise drop of water in the lung is enough." Although the Academy arena is protected by a safety zone, that spell failed to protect Sa Hyuk, for the magic he faced was not a traditional attack, but a manipulation of the environment itself. Everyone stood stunned. Our hero was still using only a first-grade spell, yet he had completely paralyzed his opponent's movement. Sa Hyuk began to actually suffocate, the features of arrogance fading from his face to be replaced by the terror of true death. The Academy students all witnessed in absolute silence the moment of Hayul's crushing victory over the most powerful technologies of the era. Hayul turned toward the teacher calmly and said, "I believe the results have become clear enough now, but I don't mind continuing if you think this wreckage is still capable of fighting." Quickly and with a trembling hand, the teacher blew the final whistle, officially declaring the end of the match to save what remained of Sa Hyuk's life. The announcement echoed through the loudspeakers. Shin Hayul is the winner of this round, making the stands explode with indescribable noise. Sa Hyuk was carried out of the arena physically and psychologically broken, dragging behind him the tales of disappointment and humiliation. While our hero walked out of the arena with confident steps, the audience cleared the way for him with a new sense of awe and respect. Hayul felt the surge of that old confidence this victory brought him, a feeling of power and sovereignty. This sensation had been absent from him for years, and now it returned to tear through the clouds of frustration that had enveloped his life. With his role as a genius mage restored, that legendary aura returned to surround him once again, announcing the king's return to his throne. In the upper booth, Kim Kong began to walk away, calmness masking his features after the battle's end. But those minutes left an indelible, lasting mark on his mind. What he saw was not just a student fight, but a new dawn of magic. He could not stop thinking that the fallen genius had truly returned, with a power that might threaten the stability of the magic tower itself. Now Kim Kong has one goal, to know every detail about Hayul's life and the secret of his ancient magic.
Meanwhile, Jason Shan was at the height of his excitement, running toward his friend, shouting and rejoicing in his great victory. He was shaking with excitement, wanting to know immediately the kind of demonic training Hayul underwent to reach this level. Jason's curiosity was nearly bursting him, especially regarding that impossible maneuver of the wind spear. He wanted to hear all the technical details. But instead of revealing Madrid's secrets, Hayul approached his friend with a mocking, playful smile, saying, "Geniuses don't reveal their cards that easily, my friend, do they?"
Hayul winked at his friend with a mysterious smile and said, "It's my own secret, Jason, and I can't give it away that easily." This response left Jason in a state of hysterical curiosity, trying to guess how his friend had broken the laws of mana right before his eyes. Hayul pulled his phone from his pocket and showed the screen to his friend to let him in on something. The news was sweeping the internet like lightning, with flashing headlines topping the platforms. The return of the genius, Shin Hayul crushes his opponent in minutes. Interviews and analyses proliferated immediately. Everyone was boiling with excitement to know the secret of the stunning instant magic our hero showcased in the arena. Experts and followers wondered madly, how did he cast spells at that speed, and how did he make the wind spear bend and merge in the air as if it were a living being? In that decisive moment, Kim Kong decided to intervene to regulate the rhythm of the chaos and protect the boy's secret. The master of the Azure Tower stepped forward to be the one to provide the official answer to the questions of the thirsty public. The arena erupted with cries of surprise and bewilderment when they saw the demonic Ice King himself. Kong announced before everyone that he had followed Hayul's duel with great interest. Then he approached Hayul and wove a clever story claiming that the boy used a secret 4th-grade spell known as preservation, a technique known to most students. To prove his point and provide a practical demonstration, Kim Kong produced a flame of pure fire in his palm without any prior movement. This display left everyone in a state of shock. The visual sight of the Tower Master showcasing his skills is an event that does not repeat. Kong explained with solemnity, "Preservation is a technique that allows a mage to prepare their energy in advance and release it suddenly when needed. This is how magic appears instantaneous. So have you wondered why everyone doesn't do it?" He continued, justifying, "Because preservation has fatal flaws. It stores spells 2 grades lower than the mage's actual level, requiring exceptional skill." He turned toward Hayul and asked with feigned seriousness, "Isn't this your secret, my boy?" His look told Hayul clearly, go along with this lie to survive. Of course, Hayul caught the signal brilliantly and confirmed every word the Tower Master said. Kong had granted him the perfect cover to hide the forbidden style of Pete New. An astonished journalist asked, "Does this mean that Hayul's actual level is equivalent to the 4th circle since he used 1st circle spells with such ease?" Kong immediately agreed with a convincing smile. "Exactly, that is the only logical explanation for what you saw today." Exciting facts began to unfold. Reaching the 4th circle at this age places Hayul among the ranks of historical legends and great Tower Masters. Since the testimony came from the Master of the Azure Tower personally, there was no longer room for doubt that the miracle had returned to the Shin family. Back in the present, Jason asked his friend with renewed curiosity, "Are you truly a 4th circle mage?" But he jumped to another quick question before hearing the response. He wondered in awe, "And how do you explain your total disregard for open-source magic rules? Those spears were moving as if they were subject to no system." To answer this puzzle, we go back a bit in our memory to where Hayul was preparing to explain the truth in his own way to Kim Kong. With total coldness, our hero revealed the stunning truth to Kim Kang. Ignoring the rules isn't complex magic. All I did was modify the structural equation of the spell during its release. Kim Kang froze in his place from the sheer shock. What he had just heard was a declaration of war on the magical physics constants established for centuries. The Tower Master muttered in awe, "This is nearly impossible. You're talking about changing cosmic laws in fractions of a second." For mages, modifying a fixed spell formula is like trying to add wings to a car and making it fly suddenly in the middle of the road. It lacks technical logic. Kang wondered inwardly with dread, what kind of monster would this boy have become if he were compatible with modern AI magic? In that moment, Hayul summoned a swarm of glowing magical butterflies that danced around him in a charming, dramatic scene. He announced in a confident voice that resonated within the Tower Master, "This technique will change the face of history, and I shall call it from now on, modification magic." Excitement ignited in Kim Kang's eyes. He realized he was standing before a magical revolution that would make everything before it look like child's play. It became evident that the global magic community was about to hit a devastating earthquake, and Kang looked forward eagerly to seeing the looks of bewilderment on the faces of the other Tower Masters. We return now to the present, where Jason Shan was eyeing his friend with a skeptical and disbelieving look after hearing about this modification magic. He shook his head, saying, "Modification magic? That sounds like a fairy tale from legend books. I can't believe such a thing exists." Huyel replying with a simplicity that killed any debate. "Facts don't change because you reject them, Jason. You'll see it with your own eyes soon." The latter decided to ignore the complexities and focus on the joy of victory. Jason prepared to return to the dorms, so Huyel asked in surprise, "Are you really leaving now? Don't you want to celebrate?" Jason raised his thumb warmly as he moved away. "I have to prepare, man. My opponent tomorrow is unlike any I've faced before. He's a monster in human form." This comment sparked Huyel's curiosity intensely. Who is this opponent that made the genius Jason feel all this pressure? The next day, the sun rose over the Obelisk Academy Stadium, which was filled with a crowd waiting for a new magical massacre. Jason Shan appeared in the center of the arena, but his features were completely different from what we're used to. He seemed unable to stand steadily, his body trembling under the weight of an immense magical pressure filling the place. Everyone realized immediately that his opponent was not just an ordinary student, but an entity from another level entirely. It turned out the opponent was a mysterious girl, standing with a terrifying calm that precedes the storm. From her charisma and domineering aura, she was known as Adele Stuart, the name that makes students in Europe tremble. She is the prodigy of the ancient French Stuart family, belonging to the Korean House of Secrets. Her magic differs radically from everything Jason has known all his life. Adele relies in her fighting on the secret moon element, a mysterious and forbidden magic derived from the shadows of the House of Secrets, making victory against her nearly impossible.
The moment Adele unleashed her magic, the color of the sky above the ring changed, as if the moon had been summoned in broad daylight. Jason was thrust backward with immense force, not by a physical attack, but by the pressure of her terrifying aura that paralyzed his movement. When she finally decided to strike, she gave him no chance to breathe or even comprehend what was happening. Radiant light bullets shot from her fingertips, piercing Jason's magical barriers as if they were fragile paper, striking his body with ultimate precision. Jason fell unconscious, leading the referee to announce the end of the brief duel in a hushed, bewildered tone. The voice thundered through the hall. "The winner of this round, Adele Stuart." The audience froze in their seats. The display she provided exceeded their perceptions of Academy student magic. Even Huyel found himself lost in thought, analyzing that mysterious power he had just witnessed. He realized her magic was a brilliant blend of light and darkness, glowing with moonlight, one of the forbidden secrets of the House of Secrets that does not subject itself to open-source magic rules, making predicting her strength impossible. It was no wonder Jason was defeated before this unknown flood. Suddenly, Huyel felt a sharp gaze piercing his being. He raised his eyes and looked directly forward toward the center of the ring. He found Adele, standing there, staring at him with piercing looks that never wavered. Her gaze clearly announced, "You are my next target," making his heart beat with the thrill of combat. Later, Huyel tried to console his defeated friend, praising his resilience, but Jason kept cursing his ill luck. "Why did I have to face that French monster at the very start?" While they were talking, Jason felt a shiver run down his spine. Adele was standing right behind them without them sensing her movement. Jason reminded him in a whisper gripped by panic. "Remember, Huyel, Adele is your opponent in the next match. Prepare for death." As if she were listening to their conversation, Adele stepped forward and said in a calm, steady tone, "I enjoyed watching your previous match. It was a battle worthy of a Shin lineage mage." Jason tried to appear humble before her despite his break. "I have learned a lot from my defeat against you." His features were a complete contradiction to the arrogance he displayed minutes prior. Nevertheless, it was evident that Adele's interest was focused entirely on Huyel, and that her talk with Jason was merely a bridge to reach him. She addressed our hero directly and without hesitation. "Finally, the true spirit of the mage you lost for years has returned to you." She completed with a defiant tone. "This is the sole reason that drove me to leave France and enroll in this academy. I hope that tomorrow you provide me with a strong competition that keeps me alert." It turned out that the Shin family and the House of Secrets share a long history of alliances and rivalries, which is why Jason had known Adele since childhood. The deep-rooted relationship between the two families allowed them many meetings at major academy occasions, making their match tomorrow not just an evaluation, but a struggle for lineage supremacy.
If Jason Shan were asked to describe his relationship with Adele in one word, he would say absolute challenge. She had left her prestigious studies in France and enrolled in Obelisk for one purpose, to surpass him. But from the moment Hayul's abilities were classified as incompatible with the magic of the age, the threads of communication were severed, and the competition that once fueled their passion vanished. The news of his technical failure was a major shock to Adele. She felt she had lost the only opponent worthy of the struggle, making her subsequent victories seem pale and tasteless. Hayul finally replied in a calm and humble tone, "Perhaps I no longer deserve to be a target for a mage of your level, Adele." She answered him with a piercing look that shattered his stillness. "We shall see the truth of that once we face each other in the arena, for true metal only appears under the pressure of mana." Jason asked his friend anxiously after she left, "Are you truly ready to face this hurricane?" Hayul replied with an indifference that sparked his amazement. "What of it? Should I tremble in fear?" This coldness grated on Jason's nerves. He tried to shake his friend's shoulders to wake him from his private world, warning him of the gravity of the situation. Jason shouted, "You don't understand. Your next opponent is Adele Stewart with all her magical weight. Why do you act as if you're going on a stroll rather than a fateful duel?" It seemed as if Hayul had finally grasped the magnitude of the challenge awaiting him, and his features suddenly shifted. He let out a powerful cry of surprise that echoed throughout the arena, as if he had just woken from a long dream. When the day of the great match arrived, the crowds gathered in a funeral silence, waiting for a miracle or a fall. Adele stood alone in the center of the arena, monitoring the entrances with clear concern, waiting for the arrival of Hayul, who was late for his appointment. Students began whispering and mocking. "Where is the genius? It seems he fled in fear of the moon magic." Mocking laughter rose at his overconfidence he had displayed in interviews. One of them said sarcastically, "The modification magic he spoke of was just empty talk for media consumption, and here he is now hiding like a rat." The referee himself began to be convinced of Hayul's withdrawal. He raised his hand to announce the end of the waiting time and crown Adele the winner by forfeit, according to the Academy's strict rules. But at that critical moment, Hayul burst into the arena, panting heavily, and shouted in a hoarse voice, "Wait, referee, I'm here!" Everyone stopped talking. Hayul painted a shy smile of apology for his lateness that had nearly toppled all his ambitions. The referee shot him an annoyed and harsh look, but decided to postpone his reprimand and hear his justification later so as not to spoil the event thousands were waiting for. The referee announced sternly, "Because of your lateness, I will not grant you 1 second to catch your breath. The duel starts now as a penalty to you." The competitors took their combat stances, Adele with her lunar calm, and Hayul with his rapid breaths trying to return to normal. Adele appeared extremely curious, asking in a low tone, "What kept you away until this moment? Were you crafting a plan to defeat me?" Hayul replied while trying to regain his usual calm and coldness, "It was nothing big, don't worry." He completed, sparks starting to gleam in his eyes, "I was just making some preliminary preparations to ensure this performance is worthy of our family's names."
Hayul painted a confident smile on his exhausted face and said, "Since my opponent is as strong as you, I had to prepare to defeat you with a fitness worthy of your standing. I promise you this battle will be truly spectacular." Adele's eyebrows rose in surprise, and she muttered, "You prepared in just 1 day?" She couldn't believe someone could flip their power balance in a few short hours. Adele began to scrutinize his appearance, noticing immediately the fundamental difference between the Hayul she met yesterday and the Hayul standing before her now. She realized through her magical intuition that they were two completely different people. The aura emanating from him now had become deeper and sharper, like a blade forged in fire. Her eyes gleamed with wild excitement, possessed by a true passion to see the latent power he hid behind his usual coldness. The moment the referee announced the start of the match, the arena exploded with an immense magical pressure that nearly uprooted the spectators from their seats. Adele summoned the lunar mana with lightning speed, turning the air around her into a radiant halo of light. She launched her first spell with unparalleled brilliance, known as the lunar flame pistol. 3 complex magic circles formed in the air, unleashing a volley of explosive fire bullets toward Hayul all at once, but he did not stand idly by. Hayul used modified wind magic, and with a swift flick of his palm, he formed a small vortex that parried the 3 bullets and turned them to ash in the blink of an eye. Adele gave him no time to catch his breath, summoning a lethal earth spell called the Earthen Needle. The arena's solid floor cracked violently, and sharp rocky protrusions emerged like fangs. Those rocky fissures shot out like snakes toward Hayul, attempting to tear his body from below. With extreme flexibility surpassing human capability, Hayul leaped high into the air, escaping the clutches of the earthen needles that shot up behind him. Cries rose from the crowd as they watched Hayul suspended in midair, far beyond the reach of earth magic. But Adele smiled maliciously. She had seized the golden opportunity she had been waiting for from the start. for a mage in the air loses balance and becomes an easy target, unable to dodge direct attacks without a foothold. She immediately summoned the Impact Arrow spell, a concentrated magical projectile that travels faster than sound. The attendees wondered in panic, does she truly intend to finish him while he's defenseless in the air? But Adele was confident that Hayul hid something that transcends logic. Or so she thought. The truth was stranger than any expectations she had drawn in her imagination. In the moment of descent, Hayul summoned dense mana beneath his feet, and instead of falling, he formed a solid barrier in the void. A silence tinged with bewilderment thundered in the stands. He had managed to create a defensive platform in the air, turning the sky into solid ground to stand on. Even Adele stepped back a pace in astonishment she couldn't hide when she saw Hayul flipping the barrier and using it as a launchpad toward her counterattack.
Hayul used that aerial barrier as a pivot point from which he launched a violent descent toward the ground, leaving Adele in a state of temporary bewilderment. Adele realized with dread that Hayul had not only regained his strength, but that his innate magical sense had evolved to a level surpassing human perception. In that moment, Hayul felt a surge of confidence in his veins, and the mana in his mind responded to every pulse of his will. He resolved to shatter the prestige of the moon element belonging to the House of Secrets, proving that his modified magic is the new master of the arena. The moment he summoned his energy, the reflected sunlight around Adele began to condense and intensify with a searing white glow. The flash became so powerful that Adele was forced to close her eyes, unable to endure looking at that raging glare. She realized through her intuition that a devastating attack was on its way, and she knew that retreating now was her only option for survival. With lightning speed, she summoned the Great Shield, a dense magical barrier designed to parry the most violent of combat strikes. At the moment her shield was completed, Hayul pounced from above like a thunderbolt piercing the clouds. He was gripping a glowing water sword he named Hero, formed between his hands from pure mana condensed to the point of solidity. Hayul struck with all his might, but Adele's third circle barrier held with difficulty, saving her from receiving a direct and fatal injury. Hayul noticed her extreme caution. She was consuming third circle energy to parry his simple spells, and this tacit acknowledgement of his power increased his determination to crush her defenses. Hayul retreated backwards lightly, leaving a short distance between them to rearrange his next attack. Adele began to gather her strength to respond, but she did not realize that Hayul had already set a trap beneath her feet. Suddenly, the ground exploded beneath her, and solid rock shackles emerged, grabbing her feet and fixing her in place violently. She looked down with a surprise mixed with terror, discovering that her body had become a hostage to a magic she didn't expect to be released so quickly. It was earthen captivity, the trap that turned the battle into a nightmare for Adele, as it robbed her of her most important advantage, fluid movement. What truly drove her mad was Hayul's superhuman speed in casting magic with no visible introductions or incantations. He was casting magic with staggering temporal frequencies, making the gap between the thought and the spell almost non-existent. His speed reached a point where Adele failed to notice his hand movements or anticipate his next steps. Her eyes followed his trace with difficulty while he manipulated the reins of the battle as he pleased. Hayul used water magic again, launching the water missile spell, a high-pressure projectile targeting her exposed chest. Adele tried to burn the ground around her feet to break her shackles and free herself in a race against time before the incoming water missile struck her. In a majestic motion, Hayul extended his hand toward the sky, as if summoning cosmic forces to execute his final will. With a swift flick of his fingers, massive water dolphins erupted from nothingness, twisting through the air with staggering speed toward Adele. Adele responded with the instinct of a professional mage, summoning a concentrated barrier magic to encircle her body like a steel shell. In that moment, she felt a flood of confidence. The barrier was designed to parry attacks far more powerful than mere aquatic formations. She believed within herself that she had become capable of decoding his style and handling his expected movements. She based her strategy on what he said in the interview, that he uses the memory spell from the fourth circle to store his magic. Since memory only activates spells 2 ranks lower, Adele intelligently concluded that Hayul was limited to meager first circle spells. This conclusion gave her a false sense of security. She was fully confident that first-grade magic would never break her lunar defenses. But oh, the cruelty of reality. Adele was about to discover the bitter truth in a way she couldn't have imagined in her worst nightmares. While she was focusing on the water dolphins before her, a thundering wind spear fell from the sky directly behind her back. The treacherous and unexpected attack completely threw her off balance. She didn't even glimpse when or how Hayul managed to cast two opposing magics simultaneously. In that shocking moment, she realized the truth. It wasn't ordinary magic, but modified magic, hiding its trajectories from the senses. This final attack drained what remained of her mental and physical strength, and she felt her body collapsing under the weight of exhaustion. Adele fell to her knees and then to the ground, while Hayul advanced with steady steps to stand before her with prominence. He looked at her with cold eyes and asked in a tone that shook her being, "Have you truly forgotten whom you face, or has the moon's arrogance blinded you from seeing the truth?" Adele's features appeared broken. The defeat was a harsh lesson she hadn't learned in all her years at France's finest academies. In the private booth, Kim Kong's assistant watched the duel in absolute bewilderment. Hayul's combat instincts had surpassed all human expectations. Even the master of the Azure Tower himself was stunned. He realized with his expert mind how Hayul planned every move from the first minute. The plan began from the moment he dodged the earthen needle. His leap into the air wasn't to escape, but to lure her into the trap. He intelligently baited her attacks, used the barrier as a launch pad to hide himself behind the sun's glare, completely disabling her vision. While hidden in the glare, he used the true memory technique to silently prepare the wind spear right above her head. Upon his descent, he used impact arrow and water dolphins to keep her gaze fixed on the ground and the direct confrontation. While she thought the battle was terrestrial, he exploited earthen captivity to paralyze her, leaving her an easy target for the spear falling from the sky. It was a guaranteed tactical death.
In the moment her body aligned perfectly with the sun's line, Hayul released the pre-prepared wind spear, exploiting his opponent's temporary blindness. It was no wonder everyone nicknamed Hayul the master of the first circle in the academy. He had turned the simplest of spells into a lethal strategic weapon. But despite this brilliance, his father, Lord Shin, remained cold and unimpressed. In his eyes, first circle magic remains incapable of delivering a finishing blow to a true opponent. The father was confident that his son would not end the battle this easily, especially since Adele had not yet used the secret magic that made everyone tremble at her family name. And indeed, the moment arrived when Adele decided to unveil her buried true power. Adele stood, her eyes sparkling with steel determination, ready to drain every ounce of mana in her body to achieve victory. Thanks to the stunning performance Hayul provided, she regained memories of their childhood and the fierce competition she had missed for years. She felt a strange euphoria facing his legendary growth face to face once again. Suddenly, the arena lit up with a wave of intense lunar blue light, flooding every corner with a cold and terrifying radiance. Hayul's face contorted with concern as he broke into sweat. He realized that what he was about to face was the pitiless secret magic of the House of Secrets. It is the greatest magical masterpiece and the holiest secret of the Stewart family, the devastating spell known as the Lunar Halo. Dozens of complex magic circles began to hover around Adele's body in a terrifying geometric formation, preparing to launch her massive attack. Silence fell over the stands. It seemed to everyone to be the inevitable end for our hero before this crushing magical weight. Even the giants like the 8-star Kim Kang and Lord Shin were certain the match's result had been irrevocably decided in Adele's favor. His father turned to leave the hall immediately, unable to bear seeing his son fall before the world once again. He was certain that his son's limited capabilities could never withstand the legendary Lunar Halo spell. He refused to witness the failure of his blood before his eyes, considering that the obvious result was not worth the wait. But his departure stopped suddenly, for when the attendees cast a final look at the arena, something occurred that shook the Academy's foundations. Kim Kang froze in his place, his mind completely bewildered, unable to believe what his expert eyes were seeing. As for Jason Shan, he was unable to utter a single word, his jaw dropping in awe at the magnitude of the scene. And the most surprised was Adele herself. The possessor of the Lunar Halo stood completely helpless and terrified before the power that erupted from Hayul. The fallen genius had done it. The mage who was cast out for his technological incompatibility had just released a shining fire circle with terrifying raw mana power. Gripping a mass of raging fire between his hands, Hayul shouted with a voice that shook the hall, uttering the name of his forbidden spell, Fiery Vulcan. Adele stood completely shocked as she saw a second circle spell manifest before her eyes. Technically, it was impossible for Hayul to exceed the limits of the first circle due to the constraints of the memory spell he claimed to use. But our confident hero left her no room for bewilderment, asserting in a definitive tone, "I stayed up through the nights preparing for every move you might surprise me with, and now the time for harvest has come." Adele could not comprehend this blatant violation of logic. How did he break the magical storage chains and reach this explosive power in a single night? The mathematical calculations of magic state that achieving this result requires reaching the 5th circle at this early age, a feat bordering on human impossibility.
Hayul contented himself with a calm and mysterious smile, leaving her to drown in her questions, while his memory drifted back to the scenes of the previous night. Returning to those critical hours before the duel, we find Hayul confined within his dark room. He was drowned in formulating a suicidal strategy. He realized that Adele was not just an ordinary opponent who could be defeated by beginner spells from the first circle. He realized with bitterness that his current combat style lacked the flexibility to face the secret moon magic, placing him in a weak defensive position. Hayul nearly surrendered to reality and accepted defeat, but his will refused to break at the last moment. His original plan relied on mastering some secret spells to increase his chances of winning, but time was his primary enemy. Suddenly, while flipping through the pages of the book Madrid, he found a mysterious document written in fresh ink, as if it had been placed there specifically for him right now. The document spoke of a latent power requiring absolute concentration of mana within a magic circle inscribed on the following pages. Deep within the book, Hayul discovered an extremely complex magic circle, appearing like a mechanical gate or a transport mechanism to a parallel world. He began to gather his scattered thoughts in awe. Could this circle be the key to enhancing his abilities and surpassing the known circle ceiling? Driven by an irresistible curiosity, he extended his trembling hand and poured drops of pure light mana over the center of the inscribed circle. In that moment, the book responded fiercely. It began to glow in his hands with an intense golden light that shook the corners of the room. Before he could comprehend what was happening, a giant beam of light ascended from between the pages, piercing the room's ceiling. The radiance was so brilliant it blinded him completely, and he felt his body being pulled into an infinite void. In the blink of an eye, Hayul vanished from his room, and his entire being was transported to another dimension. Hayul was pulled inside the world of the book itself, into the core of Madrid's lost knowledge. When he slowly opened his eyes, trying to regain his lost balance, he found himself standing in the middle of a massive legendary library, its shelves extending to infinity under a sky of magical stars. He stood there in a state of total confusion and bewilderment. What is this place, and who awaits him among the shelves of this forbidden knowledge?
His confusion was cut short by a mellow female voice echoing from between the shelves. "Welcome, Seeker. Your feet have stepped onto the first page of the first trial." From the dimness of a corner, a woman of majestic presence manifested, wearing formal black attire, her silver hair flowing like moonlight threads. It was Seal, the appointed guide for this challenge. New information flooded Hayul's mind, confusing him. The term test page was not familiar in the magic dictionaries he had studied. Seal confirmed coldly, "What you see is no illusion. You are now literally living within the magical matter of the book Madrid." Hayul felt the air around him, realizing the stunning truth. The magic circle had absorbed him into its very being entirely. It wasn't just an instantaneous teleportation to an ancient archaeological site in our real world, but a crossing into a complete sub-dimension, its laws woven from the ink of magic within the book's pages. Although Seal's logic seemed closer to fiction, the flowing energy of the place was the definitive proof of the truth of her words. Seal began reciting the instructions of the test in a tone devoid of emotion, explaining the nature of the challenge awaiting him. She added, "Your alchemical ability will be tested. If you succeed, the doors of knowledge from pages 18 to 21 will open for you, granting you the keys to the second circle." Hayul realized that this exam was his only gateway to breaking the chains of his weakness and surpassing the first circle ceiling in which he had imprisoned himself. After finishing the explanation, Seal looked directly into his eyes and asked, "Are you ready to face your magical essence?" Hayul did not hesitate for a moment. He nodded in agreement, sparks flying from his eyes, determined to win. In that moment, Seal released a spark of her magic, officially beginning the rituals of the first trial. The massive library shook, and magical symbols began to swim in the air as if they were living creatures. Suddenly, Seal's body turned into a concentrated beam of light, leaving Hayul in a state of wonder and confusion. He didn't expect his guide to be a mere spectral manifestation, and the truth shocked him that she was an entity without a human body. He realized she was a pure magical entity, relying for her survival on the mana flowing from the book's pages themselves. Suddenly, the voice of his old teacher echoed throughout the subdimension, a voice carrying the solemnity of ancient knowledge. This voice was his new guide, who would lead him on the journey of taming the power that no one had preceded him in. A glowing jewel appeared before him, emitting blinding rays, known as elemental mana light, but it was in a chaotic state where 4 distinct traits mixed unstably. Hayul was ordered to grab the jewel, to purify it and return it to its clear state. When he felt the weight of the chaos within it, a fleeting panic seized him at the magnitude of the task.
The process of purifying the incomplete mana jewel began, a task bordering on the impossible. The extreme fragility of the crystal made Hayul tremble with fear that it would crumble in his hands at the first slip. He realized that success required microscopic and precise control over the mana flow, as the mixed magical atoms inside the jewel had to be moved without scratching its thin walls. The 4 types of mana were intertwined in utter chaos, making their sorting like trying to separate tangled spider silk in the middle of a storm. Hayul likened the matter to trying to separate a mixture of sand, salt, sugar, and pepper grain by grain, a mentally exhausting task to the point of madness. The only solution lay in mastering the legendary Heart's Intent skill. It is the only power capable of permeating the jewel and purging its impurities from the inside out. Despite the weight of the task, Hayul did not retreat. Rather, the flame of enthusiasm ignited in his chest to surpass his human limits and accept this fateful challenge. His eyes gleamed with a steely brilliance, and for the first time he unleashed the essence of Heart's Intent, directing his will directly toward the heart of the glowing jewel. The mana responded to his call, and the clashing elements began to separate and organize under the pressure of his firm will. 4 separate columns of pure magical energy formed inside the crystal in a stunning geometric scene indicative of innate brilliance. Hayul raised his level of concentration to the maximum, oblivious to everything around him, as he and the jewel became one entity in the library's space. This immersion allowed him to reach levels of magical awareness that no mage of his age had ever knocked upon before. Finally, the elements aligned in 4 perfect rows, and the jewel regained its crystal-clear purity like a mirror reflecting the soul. But in the moment of euphoria, a microscopic error in the mana flow led to a sudden explosion. A violent shockwave hurled Hayul's body toward the wooden shelves. He fell to the ground, dizziness spinning in his head, as a massive book tumbled onto him, adding to his sense of humiliation and exhaustion. This failure was a harsh lesson. He learned that chaotic mana is not defeated by force, but by absolute patience that prevents explosive reactions. Hayul arose, his eyes burning with a new determination. He now had realized the gap that would enable him to pass the test, and prepared to repeat the attempt 1,000 times if necessary. Hours passed, perhaps days within this temporal dimension, Hayul being defeated, falling, then rising, trying to purify the element in a vicious cycle of pain and learning. He repeated the attempt hundreds of times, and each time he dove deeper into the secrets of his soul, until the distance between his thought and his magic vanished. Suddenly, the crystal settled into an absolute perfection. Hayul stood victorious, contemplating the elemental monolite as it obeyed his signal submissively. Ray Bal's voice thundered through the surroundings, a proud voice congratulating him. "Well done, my successor. You have passed the test where giants fell." Hayul smiled with pride, and as the Heart's Intent skill rooted itself in his being, the book Madrid began updating its pages 18 through 21 to reveal the secret of the second circle, the resonance ring. Suddenly, the light pulled his body again, and Hayul awoke in his bed inside his room, silence enveloping the place as if nothing had happened. The seamless return shocked him. He felt his body and hands to confirm he had returned safely from that journey of death, carrying with him a power that would turn his match with Adele into a historic epic.
What truly took his breath away was seeing the ink of the ancient book moving on its own, redrawing its contents before his astonished eyes. Enthusiasm flooded Hayul's being. He realized that the forbidden secrets of the second circle were now at his fingertips, ready to be breathed into the battlefield. But the race against time had not ended. The greatest challenge lay in mastering that complex power in the few remaining hours before facing Adele Stewart. With an unyielding resolve, Hayul succeeded in taming the unruly mana, emerging from his room carrying the key to the final victory. In the arena, Adele stood with the prominence of her moon, whispering activation words that shook the earth beneath the feet. She unleashed the lunar halo, that magic that covered the sky with a cold blue light signaling the end. A great force exploded, weighing heavily on Hayul's shoulders. He felt the pressure of Adele's mana trying to crush his bones and dissipate his focus. Panic seized his friend Jason Shawn in the stands, shouting in despair, thinking the battle was settled and that Hayul was finished. With absolute confidence, Adele turned her back, boasting of her imminent victory, ready to leave the arena and gloat in the title of victor. But deep down, she was still amazed. The evolution Hayul showed in a single night exceeded all standards of magical logic.
She remembered how he was always a step ahead of her in their childhood, and how she chased him for years. She thought she had finally surpassed him, but she didn't know she had fallen into the trap of silent genius. Suddenly, a terrifying beam of light shot from behind her, piercing the darkness of the lunar halo like a blade from a raging sun. Adele froze in her place and turned slowly, bewilderment masking her features. What is this pressure, and where did this energy come from? It was the official activation of the second circle of Hayul's modified magic, the power whose secret he had long suppressed. The resonance ring appeared behind his back, a double magic circle spinning at a frantic speed, emitting a hum that shook the Academy's foundations. Hayul cast the blind darkness spell to envelop the arena, merging it into a unique magical chemistry. He merged the volcanic flame with the resonance ring, entering his infinite magical circles into a magical nuclear fusion process that turned mana into raw material for wreckage. In the final moment, Hayul added the free will element, that alchemical touch that made magic pulsate with life. A terrifying silence prevailed. His father, Lord Shin, stood stunned, his eyes unable to believe his son had broken the barrier of the impossible. As for Kim Kong and Jason Shan, they froze in their places as if time had stopped at this historical moment. Everyone, including Adele, was in a state of existential shock. The emanating power was no longer just student magic, but an earthquake threatening the world's constants. Hayul looked as if he were opening the gate of hell with his hand, fire, darkness, and wind intertwined in his terrifying final spell. He pointed his index finger toward the trembling Adele, and in a tone that dominated the entire arena, he released his final command. Go, great fiery Vulcan!
Adele tried to gather the remnants of the lunar mana in her exhausted body to activate her final defensive shield, hoping to withstand the incoming hurricane of fire. But Hayul did not grant her the luxury of defense. He unleashed an explosive series of consecutive magical attacks that rent the air with a terrifying screech. The strikes followed in a precise geometric succession, like a symphony of organized destruction, targeting the gaps in her shield one after another. His spells transformed into something akin to a magical machine gun, completely bringing down Adele's defenses. A true panic seized her as she realized her inability to stop this flood. In the final moment of impact, a sweet smile formed on Adele's lips. It was her happiest moment, for she finally saw the Hayul she had long waited for, a true competitor and an invincible peer. But those romantic feelings were confined to her internal monologue only. In reality, Hayul continued shelling her position with his fiery cannon without the slightest mercy. When the dust finally settled and the thick smoke cleared from the battlefield, Hayul stood towering in the middle of the ring like an emperor who had reclaimed his lost throne, calmness enveloping his drained being. While Adele's body fell to the ground unconscious, having consumed every ounce of energy in her desperate attempt to survive. The battle ended with a crushing and exhausting victory for our hero, who pushed his body and soul to the absolute limits of human endurance. He had to gather his scattered strength and resist fainting from the acute magical exhaustion left by the resonance ring. The match concluded with the announcement of Shin Hayul's decisive victory amidst the bewilderment of thousands of attendees who witnessed the birth of a new legend. As for his father, Lord Shin, he turned to leave immediately. He had seen what he yearned to see, and his heart was reassured that his blood still flowed with power. But Kim Kong noticed the father's feigned cold reaction. He realized with his experience that this man masters the mask of cruelty while hiding a volcano of emotions. Kong was certain that the father was bad at lying. He was completely unable to hide the flash of pride that glimmed in his eyes toward his son in that moment. That pride, suppressed for years behind a wall of disappointment, now erupted as a silent acknowledgement of Hayul's greatness. After the duel, the media dragged Hayul exhausted for urgent interviews where the terrifying technical details of his final move began to unfold. It turned out that when the second infinite circle merges with the heart's intense circle, it creates a resonance that allows for the amplification of magic to mythical levels. Adele's lunar magic is a complex hybrid. It weaves together brilliant light energy and the mysterious essence of darkness. She controls the attack power by adjusting the dark magic density within the spell, a secret the Stewart family has monopolized for centuries. But Hayul managed to survive the lunar halo because he faced it with a dark magic of his own innovated in fractions of seconds. Thanks to his high adaptability, Hayul succeeded in decoding the forbidden moon magic that no one but the stewards can learn. He reconstructed the meaning structure of her magic after observing it closely. The resonance circle helped him distinguish the essence of moon magic, mimic it, and even surpass it.
Hayul realized deep within that his grueling training to purify, meaning control, the previous night had been his lifeline. Without those hours inside the book, Adele Stewart would be the one standing victorious now. As Hayul stood dazed under the impact of his victory that shook the Academy, with the crowd still chanting his name, A figure of domineering prestige cut through the throng. It was the master of the Azure Tower, Kim Kang, who had come specifically to meet the miracle prodigy face to face. Astonishment seized Huyul. It was unconventional for a man of such standing to leave his royal booth to greet a student in the school arena. Kim Kang explained with a calm that hid a volcanic curiosity. "I wanted to speak with you directly and without intermediaries, Huyul." Kang began his meeting with a polite apology for disturbing him at a time when he suffered from acute physical and magical exhaustion after the crushing battle. But he could not suppress his sincere admiration, saying, "You emerged victorious in a way I haven't witnessed in decades, and that in itself is a miracle worthy of appreciation." Huyul accepted those compliments with great humility, trying to hide his fluster from the Tower Master's piercing gaze. However, Kim Kang did not come merely for pleasantries. He had a clear interest and a desire to ask the question that troubled every magic expert at that moment. He asked in a serious tone, "Tell me, my boy, have you already reached the 5th circle of magic at this impossible age?" Huyul hesitated to answer. He didn't possess a precise definition of his current level according to the traditional standards he shatters every day. He suddenly remembered that he had indeed released a 2nd circle spell, a feat that flips the power balance and places him in the category of legendary geniuses. Kang quickly analyzed the matter. If you use the memory preservation spell and it's limited to the 3rd level, then logically it means your base level is the 5th circle. These calculations raised his suspicions about Huyul's terrifying leap. But Huyul was quick to deny reaching the 5th circle with a mysterious smile, asserting that the truth lies elsewhere, beyond traditional logic. Kim Kang posed the most complex question. "How then did you cast 2nd circle magic when you haven't reached the 5th yet? This breaks every law of magical programming." Huyul answered with a studied calm, "I relied on visual magic and structural modification, despite knowing that this explanation might seem hard to believe even for an expert mage." Kang suspected that the boy was using the modification magic that caused a stir in the press, so Huyul decided to stick to this explanation temporarily to protect the secrets of his forbidden book. It was wise to deny reaching the 5th circle. The world had not witnessed a mage of this level at the age of 18 since the dawn of history. For admitting it would have created a global uproar and manhunts from every magic tower, which is what Huyul wants to avoid for the time being. He explained to the Tower Master in a firm tone, "I want the source of my power to remain my private secret for now, until my vision for the new magic is complete." Kang acknowledged the extraordinary power of Huyul's magic, but remained puzzled by his ability to merge circles in his historical battle against Adele. After a moment of reflection, Huyul delivered the masterstroke. "I have improved the preservation spell and permanently removed its programming constraints," claiming he developed the technique himself. This explanation increased Kim Kang's excitement and bewilderment. Before him was a young man who didn't just cast magic, but was re-engineering legendary spells from scratch. Kim Kang approached our hero with quick steps and an excitement he couldn't hide, making Huyul feel a sharp tension running through his exhausted body. Suddenly, the 8-star mage's eyes glowed with a terrifying ruby color. He had used the legendary Eyes of Lishmel to pierce through Huyul's being and verify the source of his energy. While he was ostensibly praising him for improving the spell, he was in reality dissecting every atom of mana inside Huyul, searching for any trace of the alleged 5th circle. Huyul froze in his place. He felt like a naked soul before this ruby radiance that leaves no detail uncounted.